inside the locked tomb is something that could kill the Emperor. So we should definitely, absolutely not open it. Right? Right? What's up, book nerds? I'm Lucky's Universe and it's tea and a book time. This is an old segment that I'm bringing back where I drink a cup of tea and I talk about a book, only I am not drinking tea. It is coffee, but you know, suspend your imagination a little. Quick update on a personal nature. I'm so sorry if you actually like my YouTube videos, given that my posting schedule is practically non-existent. I'm going to be making a substantial effort this year to post content on here like fortnightly, I want to say, but more realistically probably monthly. Will I actually achieve that goal? Who knows, but it's the thought that counts. And if you cannot bear to go months without seeing my face, go check out my TikTok channel. That's my main channel. I post very regularly on there. Okay, tea and a book. The book we're discussing today is Gideon the Ninth, one of the most anticipated reads on my TBR shelf. If you have not read the book yet, never you fear, you can still watch some of this video as I split them into 3 parts. The first part is a spoiler-free summary of the plot, and then the second and third parts are a discussion of characters and plots. Both of those will contain spoilers probably, but don't worry, I'll give you a heads up when that's coming. Without further ado, let's get into it. Gideon the Ninth, the debut novel of New Zealand author Tamsin Muir, takes a little explaining to wrap your head around it. So let's set the scene first. We're in a solar system that has 9 planets that circle this one star called Dominicus. And if you're thinking the name Dominicus is a tad long and a tad complicated, then you are in for a world of pain because the names in this book are fucked. Okay, star system, Dominicus, got it. The magic system in this world is necromancy, where some people are born with the ability to wield either life or death energy, respectively named Thalagy and Thanagy. To use this power, necromancers must employ theorems or like math formulas to achieve their desired result. Honestly, reading this, I was so confused. I still use my fingers to calculate my 9 times tables. You really think I can wrap my head around complex necromantic theorems? No, a long time ago, before the beginning of this current novel, there was an event like an apocalypse that nearly wiped out humanity, but then this guy called the Emperor swooped in and saved everyone using his necromantic powers. Yay! Due to this, the Emperor became almost like a god to the people, and they worship him as such. The Emperor is immortal and is also served by 8 lictors who are immortal necromancers. However, the way one becomes a lictor is a secret better guarded than Hotmail guards your 2012 email account. Don't remember the last 10 emails you sent and their exact wording? No dice, bitch! As you can imagine, becoming a lictor, hella hard, hella prestigious. So after all of this, humanity divided into 8 houses, and each went to a separate planet. And we remember there are 9 planets in total, with one of the planets being the first house, which is the home of the Emperor and his lictors. Each planet or house has a ruling family, and that family has an heir who will inherit the house, and then each heir has like a bodyguard, which is called a cavalier, and their job is to just protect the heir from all harm at all costs. Our main characters are from the 9th house, which is a cult-like house which is tasked with guarding something called the Locked Tomb, which is very ominous, but also very self-explanatory. What is in the Locked Tomb? Who bloody knows, really? All we know is that inside the Locked Tomb is something that could kill the Emperor. So we should definitely, absolutely not open it, right? Right? That's the basics of the world that we're working in. Now let's get into the story. Enter stage left, Gideon Nav, 18 years old, foul-mouthed, ginger, and absolutely done with everyone's bullshit. She was raised as a slave in the 9th house, an absolute bore of a planet which just so happens to be ruled by her childhood nemesis, Harrowhark Nona Gessimus, a 17-year-old necromancer and heir to the 9th house. Now, given all this backstory that we've just gone over, you may be thinking, why is the heir to the 9th house ruling the 9th house? Like, shouldn't her parents be doing that? Well, technically they are, but Harrowhark's parents actually died some years ago, and she has just been controlling their bodies and convincing everybody that they're still alive so she can rule through them because, well, she's a necromancer and that's kind of what they do. Now, Gideon is one of the few people who knows that Harrowhark's parents are dead and that she is manipulating them, but she hasn't told anyone because, like I said, she doesn't really give a shit about anything that's happening in the Ninth House, and she just wants to run away, she wants to escape and join the Emperor's army and kill some people. Man, she's so relatable. However, right on the brink of her escape, Gideon is cornered by Harrowhark, and Harrowhark challenges her to a duel, like a fight, which of course the necromancer wins because she can literally raise armies of skeletons, and Gideon has like a cute sword, I guess. So once Harrow defeats Gideon, she offers her a deal, and it goes a little something like this. The Emperor, the God Guy, the mysterious being that resides in the first house that everyone worships, has declared that he needs more lictors to fight in his war. And of course, this is like a sci-fi, fantasy, dystopian novel. Of course, there is a mysterious war. The Emperor has summoned all of the heirs to all of the houses to attend the first house with their cavaliers to face trials, complete challenges to somehow become lictors. The whole process of becoming lictors, it's still really hazy at this point. No one really knows how it's done. Now, Harrow's official cavalier is her relative whose name is Ortis, but he's a few vertebrae short of a spine, and he is not really excited about going to the first house and possibly facing life-endangering trials. So he just like fucking hightails it out of the Ninth House. He's done. He's like, see ya. Due to Gideon's superior swordswoman skills, Harrow has proposed that Gideon herself accompany Harrow as her cavalier, disguised as a Ninth House nun who conveniently has taken a vow of silence. If Gideon agrees and helps Harrow complete the trials and become a lictor, Harrow will grant Gideon her freedom along with anything else that she desires. So of course, eventually, reluctantly, Gideon agrees. And off to the first house we go. When we arrive on the new planet, we meet all the other heirs to the houses and all of their cavaliers, and it becomes pretty clear that inter-house relations are shit and everyone hates each other. Gideon and Harrow find it really hard to work together because one, they fucking despise each other, and two, they are 100% denying their underlying sexual tension. This is enemies to lovers 101, people, get with the program. And still, nobody knows how you become an immortal lictor. This guy called Teacher, who is the head priest of Canaan House, which is the temple that all the heirs and cavaliers are staying in, explains the scarce rules of the trials. He gives each of the cavaliers a keyring and then basically says, fuck off and go live your best lives. But nobody is allowed to open a locked door without permission. Thanks, Teacher, that was really helpful. To Harrowhark Nona Gessimus, this all seems pretty straightforward. Open all the locked doors, come hell or high water, gain necromantic enlightenment, win the mysterious challenge and become an immortal lictor, and if Gideon dies in the process, that's just an added bonus. Gideon the Ninth, however, is a little more concerned with all the dead bodies that are now showing up in Canaan House. Turns out someone is killing the necromancers and their cavaliers, but who and why? There you have it, a short intro to Gideon the Ninth. If you don't want spoilers, go ahead and click off, but if you have read it and you want to talk about characters and writing, say no more, let's get into it. So we have two main characters here. We have Gideon the Ninth and we have Harrowhark Nona Gessimus. Gideon is the narrator of the entire story, so let's start with her. In short, I love her. Snarky, sarcastic, redhead, she's just my type, man. She breaks the feminine stereotype without being a dick about it, and I think that's what stood out to me the most. In some YA novels, when a female character is not like other girls, she tends to point out girly girls and frame their stereotypical feminine traits as flaws. So things like caring about clothes and wearing makeup, these things become demonized. And we're made to think that these sorts of traits make a girl shallow or boring or even evil. Neither Gideon nor Harrow are your typical girly girls, but they still don't make a point of pointing out how much they are not like other girls. This novel is littered with a lot of strong female characters, some of which are written to be beautiful and more stereotypically feminine, but there are still no comparisons being made. which when you think about it makes sense because the entire book is about competing in necromantic trials to become immortal, and there's also like a murder mystery thrown in there. Like, no one gives a shit about who is and isn't like other girls. Like, it's not even an issue in this world. And why are there not more books like this? They would be so much more interesting to read. Also, to do with Gideon's character, I started reading Gideon the Ninth by listening to the audiobook, and then I finished it reading the physical book. And the audiobook, the narrator, one of the best audios I've ever listened to. The narrator really gave life to Gideon's character, gave her personality, gave her dimension. And I was pleased to see that her personality really carries over into the physical book. Like, just even reading the way that she talks, it's so Gideon, you know? And that's kind of the feeling that you want when you're reading a novel. So, Harrow, or Harrowhark, known as Jessimus, aka the Necromancer of the Ninth House, aka Gideon's love interest, aka Gideon's arch enemy. She's a pretty good character. She's spiky, she's mean, but she's also a super genius who will do anything to get what she wants, and I love it. She complemented Gideon really well. Gideon was like the brawn, and Harrow was like the brains, and call me old-fashioned, but I love the brains and brawn combination. Their relationship felt really fleshed out, although I am kind of sad that we didn't get more time with them as a couple. But also there's so much content in this book, like I understand why there wasn't really time for their romance. Also, this is not a romance novel, so like, duh. Among some of the other characters, one that I also enjoyed was Dulcinea Septimus, the deep fake of the century. She was actually an immortal lictor in disguise going to the first house to infiltrate the trials and murder everybody in order to get revenge on the Emperor. Her character, or at least the character that the character was pretending to be, was very light and airy, and she was so like sweet and kind, and it was just a fresh of breath air, a breath of fresh air. The aesthetic of this book is very drab and grey and dark and gruesome, so Dulcinea was just like this little fairy just spinning about, fangirling about Gideon. It was very cute, and I really liked that about her. The author did such a good job of making me think that she wasn't the murderer, because I suspected her right from the start, because I thought, well, she's the most innocent, which makes her the most guilty, right? But then as the story progressed, the author was fucking gaslighting me, man. And by the end of the novel, I was like, there's no way she's the murderer. Like, it's impossible. And then bam, reveal. When I tell you, I felt so betrayed. Like, Dulcinea, my girl, what are you doing? I wish we had a little more backstory on Cytherea the First, who was the lictor who was pretending to be Dulcinea. See what I mean about the names in this book? I'm going insane. Once she revealed her true identity, it was quite near the end, and then it became a race to the finish, and I don't know, I feel like we missed out a little bit on learning about Cytherea. Finally, let's talk about the writing in this book. Like I said, I listened to the first half of the book, and then I read the second half. I personally, from a writing perspective, I thought it was really good. The way the author brought to life the vibe of this world, like all of the darkness and all of the necromancy and the death and the magic, like the description was really skillful. And to be honest, I am not a fan of lots of description, but in this case, I feel like it was a perfect balance. Like, we got just enough that we could picture everything. Like, the author gave us the important details that we needed to piece together the setting without going overboard and just slamming us with pages and pages of descriptive language. Where I did struggle was in the names of the characters and the sheer amount of characters that there are in this novel. Other than Gideon and Harrow, the other characters were kind of all dumped in at the same time, and they all have very long names, and they're also referred to by several nicknames each. So I found it very difficult to keep track of who was who and who belonged to each house, because when you think about it, there are 8 houses, and each house has at least an heir and a cavalier. Sometimes there were 2 heirs, so that's minimum 16 characters. It is just, I don't do well with character names. I'm really bad at it, and I just couldn't remember who was who. In the end, I just accepted it and proceeded with oblivion. I had a grasp on like 2 or 3 characters, and I just left it at that. I think also I don't absorb information very well when I'm hearing it. I do much better at memorizing if I'm looking at something that's written down. So I think listening to the audiobook, I couldn't absorb the information. Let's talk about the pacing. I think the pacing in the beginning was a little slow, but I also think that's just a personal opinion of mine and not really an objective writing fact. I personally prefer when books just, you know, you got a little bit of exposition and then you get straight into the story. But I understand that what makes this book stand out from other YA books is the world building. At least that's what stands out for me. So I understand that like we need a couple of chapters of explaining how this all works. There's just a lot of backstory to fill in before we get to the heart of the narrative, and that's okay. The writer maintained an extremely consistent character voice for Gideon. It was amazing. The book was written entirely from Gideon's point of view, which I think was great because Gideon, when you think about it, is like an outsider. She was raised as a slave in the Ninth House. She's not an heir, she's not a cavalier, she's not even a necromancer. She has like literally no value. So she is like viewing all of these necromancers and their cavaliers with an outside perspective rather than the perspective of someone like, say, Harrow, who has always been on the inside. However, it does make me a little concerned for the sequel. As you would know if you have read the book, if you haven't, this is a major spoiler, but Gideon sacrifices herself at the end of the book to help Harrow become an immortal lictor, and Gideon kind of gets absorbed into Harrow. So she's not dead, but she's not alive. She's part of Harrow now. To my understanding, the second book now follows Harrowhark, which could be good, also could be not good. I'm honestly not great with books that switch main characters, but I like Harrow well enough, so I'm gonna give it a good go. It'll be interesting to see how Harrow views herself as opposed to how Gideon views Harrow, because Gideon throughout the entire book was actually subconsciously in love with Harrow, so it would make sense that she would portray Harrow in a slightly more positive light. But now Gideon isn't the narrator, it's Harrow, so we're gonna find out how Harrow views herself rather than how Gideon views Harrow, if you catch my drift. All in all, like in general, the writing is superb, the structure is amazing, it's just the pacing and the characters that fell short for me. But those are very minor details. The world building is where it's at. It takes a while to wrap your head around it, but once you do get the hang of it, it's super immersive, and you just, once you're in it, you don't want to be out of it, you know? There you have it. Tea in a Book, Gideon the Ninth, finally moved from my TBR shelf to my shelf. I'm looking forward to reading the sequel. Will I actually get to read it this year? Let's not raise our hopes too high. If you don't already follow me on TikTok, go check that out. I post some pretty cool stuff on there. I will also leave a link to my Instagram and my Goodreads account down below so you can keep up with what I'm reading. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you later. Oh, it's cold.